topics today. And I've broken this down into 4 areas. So the first place.
So would you share the screen? Yeah. Perfect.
So I've broken this topic down into 4 areas that we're going to walk through one by one. First is how to companies, financial companies is could be your stations or. And then from there, we're going to talk about how each of those can have its inventory stocking set up. So how do you want to recognize inventory in certain locations and its availability? We're also going to be talking about the inventory and warehouse management. In the second, start talking about demand. So we've got demand from all over the system, from work orders that need to be executed, shop that needs to be replenished. Lots of different places people can be requesting things as well. So we're going to talk about the demands and then how do we go about fulfilling those demands. To move things from one location to another. And then once we talk about those various fulfillment mechanisms, I'm going to focus on the order management from a purchase point of view. So we'll go into some of the different kinds of orders that are generated. How do we do a request for quotation? How do we create a requisition? So forth. What do those look like? And then our last section will contain topics like shipping and receiving. We're going to need to ship things out perhaps to customers. We're going to ship things between various locations. Maybe we're shipping a part out for repair. And then the other aspect, the opposite aspect being that we will then be receiving parts that we purchased, parts that we sent out for repair, parts coming from other locations, and so on. So that's how we're going to proceed through the next couple hours here. And we're going to start off with that inventory and warehouse management topic. So we're going to see some of those capabilities within IFS Cloud. We're going to talk some more about how financial companies break down into different sites or locations, and then how after that. We're going to cover some of the functions that are available, warehouse management and inventory management. In financial concept. So the companies will contain the chart of accounts, any kind of reporting companies all around AP, AR, GL, and so forth. You can have as many companies as you want in your IFS cloud system, and then those can optional structure. You can have as many parent companies as you need as well. We need to start chain concept. So that's where we're going to have our demand, our supply, all of our housing functions. They're all handled at a site level. So each site will be linked to one financial company for creating our GL entries and so forth. And then a company can have as many sites as you need to have. And then each of our sites will have its own warehouse setup, and we're going to learn about that part next. I'll think about some of the functions that are available in warehouse management. This is a one-slide view of a lot of those capabilities. It's not exhaustive by any means. I put some of the features here that I thought would be most interesting to GMF, with that objective of showing how we can support various kinds of operations. So up at the very top, we have our part master data here. We can define various characteristics around those parts as to how they will be handled in the system, they require special storage and so forth. And then each of those parts will be assigned to You can also see that the defense operations could be their own site as well. Again, you can break this down into many sites as you want. Typically, they will say be associated with some kind of address or some kind of something that's unique about its operation versus control. We have can optionally define things like weights and volumes and dimensions. Some things might have shelf life associated with them. There could be some requirements around temperature controlled storage, or maybe it's hazardous materials, and we want to make sure that they're stored in appropriate locations. And then stocking levels. So how much should we be keeping in each location? How do we replenish that over time? There's various ways of doing that as well. So this warehouse and bay row tier bin, this the top. So you can describe any of your stocking location with as broad as you'd like, or down very specifically to a bin level, for instance. So it breaks down into what we call a warehouse, a bin. So you do up to 5 dimensions then to the inventory stocking location. And that combination of warehouse, bay row, tier bin then will result in a location ID, which is what we see on the far right. So the only mandatory one here is the warehouse field. So optionally, you can divide your warehouses into, say, aisles or bays. You can tiers, you can intersect those and have bins. So if you can get down to, a stocking location that's the size of this desk, for instance, or you could have a warehouse that's the size of the campus if you want to. It's completely up to you how you define that. And some of the parameters associated then with the stocking location are what's the size of location, perhaps how much can it hold? Is it refrigerated? Can it support hazardous material? Can we mix things in a bin? Again, completely user definable how you do that. Then those that text in green we're going to talk about here on the next phases. We talk about the warehouse itself, but some of the features that are available in inventory management. Again, serial and lot tracking. Any part can be defined in the system as requiring serial identification and perhaps identification and control work. We'll see some examples of with different requirements on them, and then we'll be able to transact some of those at a serial level or lot level. The next is in capabilities. So this has 2 aspects to it. First of all, we have the option of defining our inventory stocking locations as, for instance, being of a certain size, or it can hold a certain amount of weight, or perhaps a certain volume. We could also say that a location is temperature controlled or humidity controlled. You could say a location can support hazardous materials, or maybe they're explosive or reactive, or any other kind of user-defined characteristic that would apply to the location. And then the other aspect of it is that you can say this is what your part requires. Your part weighs this amount. Therefore, you can't, if you've got a location that'll store that can hold 100 kilos, you can't put 120 kilos worth of parts into it, because that will cause the location perhaps to collapse. Same goes for the volume, the size of something. If something is 2 meters wide and the location is only 1 meter wide, well, it's not going to fit. So the system then will make sure that you don't put things into inappropriate locations. And the same will go then for temperature, humidity, and so forth. The idea here is that we want to make sure that we put things into appropriate locations. And that's really what that third way. So these will make sure that we put goods in appropriate locations based on what the part requires. And the other aspect of it is that when we say receive something and we want to find an inventory location, it can prioritize your locations for convenience purposes. So if I have 4 eligible locations, the first one is probably going to be the one that is closest to where it's going to be used, for instance. So I would put things there first, as opposed to something that is across the street from where it's ultimately going to be used. So that's the other aspect of put away, is that it'll make sure it goes into, say, a legal. Also, it'll also prioritize how we put things away. Now, when it comes to ownership and vendor managed inventory, this is another aspect. You're going to have your own parts, but you're also going to have parts coming in from customers. And you need to be able to segregate that inventory, what's customer owned inventory versus what's company owned inventory, and make sure that you're not using customer owned inventory when you shouldn't be. And likewise, the same will go for anything that perhaps a supplier would own until you use it. We'll be able to see this is consigned goods. Okay? And that then brings up the aspect of vendor managed inventory as well. So you can determine what your stocking level should be, or you can give that function to a supplier or a vendor, and they're responsible for keeping you stocked. Okay? That's what ownership a little bit later as well. Now, availability controls, these are going to be user-defined parameters that will further control what you can do with some inventory. So this could be unserviceable inventory. It could be quarantined inventory. It could be something that's awaiting disposition, or it's condemned. Whatever you want those controls to be, you can define each of them individually with its allowable behaviors, if you will. Then coming into the bottom item here, we're going to see an example of this. So this is scheduled and on-demand counting. Perhaps that's a process that you have to go through. Stock level management and replenishment. There's various ways of making sure that we have stock on hand, where we need it, and when we need it. That can also include refilling specific locations or using a Kanban methodology, if you've got any of that, or if that perhaps is something you could use in the future. Very useful for keeping, say, line side locations stocked with things that you're using on a frequent basis. Kitting, so defining kits for either purchase or in-house assembly, keeping track of kit contents. So I can issue then a kit to a work task, for instance, and I will know all of the parts that went into that kit. The idea of handling units, these are virtual or perhaps actual multi-level containerization of inventory that's in stock, or perhaps that's being shipped or received. So we're going to see an example later in the shipping area where I've sold some parts to customers and I put them on a pallet. Maybe they go into boxes that go onto a pallet. And now I can recognize that whole pallet and what each of its contents is in each of its boxes and so forth. And then I can handle that pallet as one unit. I don't have to move all the individual parts that are on the pallet. So that's what we refer to as a handling unit. We have the active, this is the active management of parts that are in a quarantine status. We don't want to use it, but we do need to go through some kind of dispositioning of those. Perhaps they can be used, perhaps they need to be scrapped, perhaps they need to be returned to a vendor and so forth. And that will enable you to do that, get those things out of quarantine in a controlled and trackable manner. The last one on here, shelf life. Of course, sometimes we have things that will expire over time, and we want to make sure we don't use things that have expired. And lastly, on the left-hand side, we'll see an example of this in a little bit. All of our warehouse transactions can be executed not only on a laptop, but also using, say, a warehouse data collection device. And this looks like a cell phone, but it's got a very fancy barcode reader in it to do warehouse transactions. So we're going to dive down a little bit further into these stocking locations. So again, we can have our site. We'll talk about this Jakarta as simply one of our sites in the system. And then each of our sites can have its own definition of its warehouses. And again, up to 5 elements or segments that warehouse, bay, row, tier, and bin. Again, you have a lot of flexibility here as to how detailed you want your stocking locations to be. And then they will have some behaviors associated with them. So each one will have a type. And based on the type, there's various things you can. Is arrival, is representing a receiving dock location. So goods have arrived from perhaps a vendor from another location. They're not ready to use yet until we put them away in the inventory. Perhaps they require some inspection and so forth. And then the shipment location is going to be the opposite of that. So I've got the fill out someplace. They're in perhaps a staging location waiting to be sent out the door. Quality location, that is exactly what it sounds like. Anything that's in a quality type location can't be used yet until they get out of that quality location. Those pretty much are, you could do whatever further restricted based on the availability control. But those are our use locations, if you will. Floor stock, we're going to have things in inventory that are in locations. Then capacities, conditions, and capability. Talked about this already as well. And then you have the ability to group things into storage zones. You can have warehouse routes. So if you need to go pick, let's say, 25 parts, and they're stored all over the warehouse, you don't want to be hopping from one location to the other. You can make a path through your warehouse and the pick order, so you go through in the most efficient manner. So let's come out and take a look at warehouse locations here. And this is the IFS cloud. And what you start here seeing is you can configure as a user the kind of things that you want on your home page. And we're going to be seeing some additional things that you first to what we call a lobby. A lobby is also going to be a very common starting page at a dashboard. I'll talk more about these as we start using them as well. But what I want to show to you first is the warehouse navigator. So this is how we're defining our warehouse in our facility. And we'll see here on the left-hand side is the kind of the IFS all structures of something. Inside, I've broken this down into 6 different warehouses. Cursor here, I can see how this can break down further into bays, rows, tiers, and bins. Simply by clicking on this navigator, I can get down further into the stocking location. So the warehouse main store here, as it breaks down into, I have 3 bays here for stocking purposes. I also arrivals, those are my parts that are coming in. They're on the receiving dock. I've got a receiving bay, I've got a shipping bay, and I've got a serviceable bay. And this is completely user definable, but we're going to break down some of these. So we can see it breaks down into these rows A through F, and it also breaks down into an upper and lower tier. So if you think of this as being an aisle, we've got 6 segments going down the aisle, and then we have an upper tier and a lower tier on this. That's how we define that. And then if I click on one of these, I can see that I have 4 bins here because I have 2 bins in the lower tier and 2 bins in the upper tier. So I'm going to have inventory existing in the bin level in this case. Now, when I click on any of the nodes in the navigator, then on the right-hand side, we get some more details related to that place where my cursor is. So we see this breaks down into 7 tabs. What we'll look at first is the locations tab. And so what this is saying is that row A has 4 locations in it. I can see that it is all row A, upper and lower tiers here, and then the various bin locations. I can also in this transaction see what's in row A right now. Simply by clicking on parts in stock, this is all my inventory that's currently sitting in row A. And likewise, if I select a different node of the cursor, I'll get a different list of parts. I can also,
You put the rules for placing materials on the material master.
say again,
We have part numbers that this part number only can be put it on the bay number 2.
yes,
We put in the material master.
yes, exactly,
We determine automation of put away and picking.
correct,
Is that right?
it is correct.
Including the people.
Yeah.
We put in the material master.
Yep, what your requirement is for picking purposes, yep, if you want FIFO, FIFO. We also support 3 other ways of how do you want to have picking strategies. And then also on the part master, and I'm glad you brought that up, because also on the part master, perhaps my part needs to be in temperature controlled storage or it's hazardous. Each of my locations will say whether or not it can support that. So if you've got something that needs to be, say, in a refrigerated location until you use it, you'll have that requirement on the part. You'll know which locations can do that.
Yeah.
And then the put away will say, if you try to put it into a different location that isn't refrigerated, it's not going to let you do that. So it enforces the rules that you have on your part.
One of important thing on the main store is cross-docking. Disable cross-docking.
Cross-docking to some extent, we're working on improving that.
On purchasing.
Yes.
And then not need to put in the
Correct.
keeper on the store.
Yeah,
Cross-dock.
yeah.
Able to
There's some capability. Honestly, it needs to be improved, but there is some capability for cross-docking today. And we're working on improving that. Recognize the requirements.
open requirement.
I understand, yeah, yeah.
Belum.
Yes, sir.
Can you do, instead of FIFO, you do FIFO first expired first out.
Yes, the first one, FEFO is first expired, first out. And then FIFO is what we refer to the second one, first in, first out. Yeah,
Can you make FIFO the default?
Yes.
Taking mechanism?
yes, you
And
can.
then what about the multiple conservation? If part is only maybe 1 inch, only 1 left, but there are 3 reservation for this part, can the system automatically perform the picking or direction of this order to pick, or should the user decide which order to pick?
That's a really good question. So there is an automatic reservation process where when we need 3 parts, for instance. You can set up some rules because what if you have 3 parts that are sitting? Or you could also have 3 parts sitting in one little bin. So you can say, I'd rather go get the 3 parts that are in one bin rather than having to go, my quantity of 3 is in different parts of the warehouse. Another rule is to how that pick list should be created.
Yes.
Again, so you can still in the most efficient manner.
Well, okay, getting these
Yeah.
same part,
Exactly. Yeah.
Make this to be stored only in several weeks.
That's a zone, then I don't have to worry about it ending up all over the campus, right? Yeah, exactly.
And several bins to be developed in our current system. We can only set 1 bin in the as default. And if the bin is full, there are no ways for us to change to another bin.
Right.
So they will lock the put strategy into one specific bin.
Right.
That's our restriction right now. Can you make it 3 4 bins or 1 say one level of storage location for say batch A, batch B, or batch C.
Yeah, yes. So there's two things going on there. We do have a default location. So if, let's say something is stored in a storage tank, it has to go into that tank. That's one thing. You can use a default location for that. However, to what you're talking about, we use the put away strategy. So we say, okay, here's our 4 places it could go, and we group them together in a logical way. And say that I've got 100 of them to put away, for instance. But my first location can only hold 75. Okay, fine, put the 75 in there, and then in your put away strategy, you said, here's my next priority. And I can put the remaining quantity in there, or maybe it can only hold 10, and then you can put the remaining quantity in. But again, you've designed what this put away strategy should be, and it'll enforce the rules. I can only put this kind of part in there. I can only put a certain quantity of them in there. So that's how you define that, and you end up, your put away strategy ends up representing that default how you want to. That situation where it's full, I have nowhere else to put it. It takes care of that. Okay,
Please continue.
and I'll show you a little bit about how that's set up as well. If I wanted to look at, say, Bay 2 and wanted to see the parts that are in stock here, I simply click on Bay 2 and it'll repaint this transaction on the right-hand side to show me what is sitting in Bay 2 at this time. So these are my parts that are in Bay 2 right now. And just a couple more examples. What's in my arrival location? My arrival location, 3 different locations now. So I can have my normal arrivals, this is my dock, but I might also run into the situation where I've got a receiving discrepancy. Maybe the paperwork's missing or something along those lines. So that's another arrival location in my place, but you can see there that it's got a control on it, which means that there's further restrictions on what I'm allowed to do with the parts that go into receiving discrepancy. The same goes with quarantine. So you can have as many arrival locations, but this is just an example of how you could set up arrivals. And then the same with my quarantine location here. Maybe this is for parts not coming in, but I discovered something. It needs to be quarantined. I can put it into a general quarantine. Maybe I have the shipper shelf. Maybe there's some first article. So those are ways that I can handle parts that need to be restricted as to their use. And let's see, we're going to go down to this one and Bay 1A. And what I wanted to show you here is that I have my capacities and my conditions. So this is what my location can support. And what I've got here, what I've defined is the size of it. It's 5 by 5 by 5, and that can be whatever unit of measure you want that to be. It can also hold 125 cubic whatevers. So if your part is, say, 6 meters wide, my location's only 5 meters wide, I can't put it in there. So it'll stop me from doing that. And it can also hold 500, say, kilos. If I try to put 750 kilos in there, it's not going to fit, so it won't let me do that. And this one also happens to be temperature controlled. So that's how you assign what your capabilities are to individual locations. And then also when it comes to the quantities that can be stocked in any location, one place you can do that is in a handling unit capacity. So you can say this is how many pieces you can go in there. Yes, sir.
In case of the temperature and UV,
Yes.
can it read the data from our let's say the automatic temperature and fetch the actual and current data to the database, compare it to the maximum and minimum. So system can first alert or first warning when the temperature or close to maximum.
Like a sensor that would be tracking the temperature in here?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we have the automatic logger.
Mhm.
However, the automatic logger is not connected to it. Will basic. We can fetch the data to the database and then we can plug whether the temperature is going up.
That,
Yeah, and with the platform itself, everything is called open API architecture. So any tool you're using, as long as it has some level of technology where it can send messaging,
right.
then we can accept inputs from that, and that can then leverage the rest of our alerting and notification framework, send notifications and things like that. The log system has some degree of intelligence, that ability to send that data, then we can definitely add in. And there's a lot of different ways that you can surface that as an alert, a notification, a queue, whatever you want. The right person or group was.
Currently, we playing with the Arduino system, and we also have the somehow Chinese made temperature humidity system.
Yeah.
Somehow closed system.
Yeah.
Which do you have any recommendation, or maybe there are you can use anything you want?
So I think we've got a couple IT folks in still today. My apologies, I think I don't remember his name. What are you running an ESP in terms of a message broker like or Boomi or something like that? How do you do your integrations between various systems?
Currently, we integrate our ERP system just with the LM system.
Please, sorry.
LM system.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. So you don't have a core ESP that handles all of the message broker activities between different systems that you have?
You mean integration with the sensor and so on?
With, I don't know how many different kinds of things, but for example, through the airline piece, I assume are you using Sabre or something like that for your flight system? So is Sabre integrated into? So. Or other ESP to handle the message.
You either there.
We don't really care what you use on the other end, so I think you're using it, we don't think yeah. So if it can talk to ActiveMQ, then ActiveMQ will handle the message translation. A lightweight message broker built into our platform is, but it's not meant to be an enterprise service bus for a big company. So for some smaller things, we do have also a message to message translation and retries and logging. But if you're running ActiveMQ, that's the answer. So you use whatever you're, and come up with your own creative solutions. You send the message to ActiveMQ. ActiveMQ would make sure that it formats it properly for us. If the message fails, it will handle the retry or tell Arduino that hey, this connection didn't work. So that's how that looks for your complete like enterprise architecture. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So it should the IFS already prepare about the open API, so you can configure one of the business.
Correct. With whatever anything you want. And as I said, it does have a lightweight built-in message broker already, but it's really there just for like, the odd thing where you have a system that I can't think of a great example right off the top of my head, but it's very basic. You wouldn't use it as your complete solution. And the fact you have not for me your answer, I really feel no word. Well, thank you. Sorry, Mara. Overarching sort of piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Carry on.
Carry on.
Thank you. Okay, so I did want to show you at least a couple of the transactions capabilities that are available. And a very common one, of course, is to do counting. So in IFS Cloud, you can have counting set up to occur automatically on a periodic basis. You can also create a count report at any time and go out and execute that count. And any ad hoc kind of counting is also supported. So we're going to use a count report. What we're going to do is create the count report that can be set up ahead of time. And let's say every night at 2 a.m., I want to generate a count report for my A parts that haven't been counted in the last 90 days in a certain part of the warehouse, and then go. And that report's ready in the morning. And then the next night, it'll do the same thing for the parts that haven't been counted since X number of days, and so forth. So that's what's happening here on the scheduled report with the parameters that you set. Then once you go out and do your counting, you're going to enter in the results that you have. And we'll see that here momentarily. And what we're also going to set up here, it's optional on the left-hand side, is a deviation validation. And this is going to compare two parameters. So what is the value of the difference? If I thought there were 100 parts and I report there's 75 of them, what's the value of that difference? And then the percentage in the quantity. Because if I've got 100 parts and I report there's 99 of them, but they're fasteners, and they're only worth a little bit a piece, I'm not going to worry about it. But if I think I have 100 of these and I report 99, they're worth, say, $100,000 each, that's going to be a real problem, right? Is about. And when you then confirm that your count is correct, if it violates that deviation setting, it will reject the count. And it will then have to be recounted or confirmed that that is indeed accurate. And otherwise, it's okay, there's no deviation. And then at the time, proving any rejected, we're going to write our accounting entries for the decrease in inventory value as well as our inventory position. So if it was indeed 99, it'll change that value. This is all supported by barcode as 3D. So this is an example of how you could create a count report. This is an example of an assistant that we have. You can always tell those because they'll have a series of buttons or steps across the top. And I've said here that I want to work in my storage zone W1. My parts into whatever's in W1. I'm also going to say that they're only my A parts, my more important parts. And I say I'm working on my fast movers. So these are things that turn over frequently. So this report will get created for me automatically. Yeah.
Can you go over to the screen?
Back to this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, there's a tagging, right? The company owned.
Correct.
Basically for this one, all the parts can have this tagging.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying down here on the bottom is what do I exclude from this? So if I have A parts that are fast movers, but they were loaned from a supplier, I don't want to count them if I hit that switch. So this all serves to exclude. Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's go take a look at what are those counts gonna look like, and we're gonna come back out to IFS Cloud, and I'm gonna show you an example here of a lobby that we're actually gonna work with. Now, lobbies can be, they're dashboards, if you will. This could be your start page when you. The system comes loaded with a couple hundred of these to get started. You can make your own lobbies as well. So each one will contain some what on there and elements, counters here. We also have some lists of parts. We have some performance tricks here. So those are the different kinds of things on a lobby element. I tended to say draw your attention to certain areas. So here, and I have that I need to count. And there are 68 lines of those, and I have that's in red. The fact that with these reject. So we're going to use our account reports to count button, and it's going to open up those 9 that we have in here. And each of the lines here will tell us what was that collection of things that we wanted to be counting. And here's my A-class parts that were fast mover. We're going to work with. And we're gonna go to this count report here. So when I select a line anywhere in IFS Cloud, what you'll find is there's a series of buttons that appear here. And you can then take action on this record based on those buttons. Well, the action that we want to do is the count per count report. So that's going to open up my next transaction here where I have my count report and my parts that are that need to be counted here. That can be down to the serial level and the lot level. And then once we enter our count, we put that in here. And I've already counted 9. System thought there were 11. Typically for users, you would hide that column. You don't need them to know. They say, oh, there must be in here, therefore I'm going to put 11 in. So you'll do a blind count on that case. It makes my life a little easier when I kind of number to put in there. That's why I have 115 here. So we're going to say that I have counted in this case 90. And when we save that record, the first thing that's going to happen is approval needed. So I violated those settings that I had earlier with respect to the value or the difference in the count percentage wise. So this one has been rejected. This so any change to that or when I come back, allow me then refreshed automatically. Let somebody into the meeting here. So my rejected counts, I can look at that and find all the places where what we just did is here. So I've got my rejected count in that case. Yes, that's
So we are talking about the stock counting and cycle counting.
Correct. Yeah, it's just counting in general, but it can be cycle counting. Yeah.
Yeah, for does it include the definition of stock option or only for cycle counting?
Yeah, I'm actually
Is it only for
admitting
cycle
it
counting?
already.
If
Say again.
what we are talking about, is it about cycle counting, the operational cycle counting, or also included for the stock option, which is the inventory for financial report. So there are 2 different ways to count the stock.
Okay.
In IFS. One is cycle counting. Cycle counting is when the part is moving, or we can differentiate the strategy whether we can talk about ABCs, we can
Yes.
talk about the locations.
Correct.
But it's only for a small amount of item.
Okay.
Stock option is for the whole item.
Okay. The physical.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often refer to that as a physical count.
Okay, so
Yes.
we are not talking about physical counting.
This both are supported.
But right now we are only talking about cycle counting. This one.
In this case, I said that, yes, I wanted to do a cycle count on some set of parts. Yeah, but if I want to do a physical count on, I can do that as well. It's virtually the same process.
Regarding the physical count.
Yes.
What is the strategy from IFS for cycle for physical counting? Do you need to freeze all the stock in one day to be counted, or can we perform the counting during operation? So the bin will not be freeze, the transaction can be still performed, or should we freeze the stock and freeze the operation at the whole while we do the physical counting?
See this little flag here called freeze stock? It's going to be up to you
Okay.
whether or not you want to freeze stock while the count is going.
So we perform the physical counting without freezing the stock.
Correct.
So following up the freezing and freezing stocks, what do you suggest? Is it in IFS recommending to do the freezing stock during the stock of NEM or just
We don't make a recommendation, we just support whatever it is really, it's how the business wants to
Oh.
handle that.
at the end of the day, it's not impacting the operational level,
Correct.
right?
Usually in my experience, the freezing
Yeah.
part really is gonna depend on what is the stock, how is it distributed, how often does it move? Like and how accurate does the count need to be? In my experience, it's a case basis. You know, if you're doing a rotable count on something, one, you should know kind of what your demand looks like, so you should be able to find a time window where you can. And because of the much higher value of those items, you want to make sure you have a very accurate count. On the other hand, if you're doing a site free issue stock, that's if your count isn't quite perfect, do you care? If not, you're probably not going to freeze it. If you're within, you know, a count of 10 on something you're counting 10,000 of, and the total value is only a couple of $100, you're probably not going to block your staff from continuing to work with that. But so to Karen's point, you decide, but that's sort of, at least in my experience, the thought process that usually goes on. Although I've seen companies that shut their entire business down for 3 days, basically, to do a count of everything, but that doesn't seem like the best business decision usually.
Now, something else that's very helpful though, is if you choose not to freeze the stock and people are transacting, that count report will be updated with the on-hand quantity in those locations. So at the time that somebody gets there, that on-hand quantity is correct at that time. I think that's very useful, and then it helps to prevent having to walk down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that we have difficulties in our current system is doing physical count. The moving of the parts is not calculated, so there will be a huge discrepancy between the data take and when the data take.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Maybe 7 days to 5 days.
Yes.
There's a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, why? How do you not tell the system that you're using parts? Like, how does it not know that you?
Well, the count report.
When you do the physical count, you need to go the data.
The report is a snapshot in time, not a line.
Not like it was.
I get it now. Okay.
That's the problem with cycle counting. So in fact, but you still the discrepancies.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Is it simple for this? Maybe we can help.
I'm gonna do that next, actually. Okay. So. I just wanted to introduce this idea of warehouse data collection. So not only can you run all of IFS cloud on a mobile device like a tablet or even a phone. In fact, we talked yesterday that IFS actually uses IFS. So I can do expense reports and so forth on my phone, and it's using the normal expense application that I would see on my laptop. However, what we've also done is to make several purpose-built apps for handling certain kinds of transactions, and one of them is warehouse data collection. So it is an app available on the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, and the Microsoft Store. It's been optimized for this kind of device. So the thing with warehouse data collection is that everybody wants to do warehouse data collection differently. We support over 70 next year. So I'm going to show you an example of that here. But you write the configuration one time and it goes out to the device, no matter what kind of device it is. So you could be using 12 different kinds of devices. You're going to write the configuration for each transaction one time, and it goes out to the device and devices. You're going to write the configuration. So what will happen is I've got my different kinds of devices. They will all get the same transaction. So I want to show you what that would look like. So here I have, this is the Microsoft Store version of warehouse data collection. We call it Scan It. And you're going to be able to configure this with the different look like here, transactions. You can see here, I have some inbound warehouse data transactions. So let's scan it. I have some outbound transactions as well, and you can put whatever transactions in there that you want. You can see and then warehouse operations is where I can push things like movements and counts and so forth. So I have another folder here for counting. Again, this is probably the user configurable. In here that you want. And then And I'm gonna do this count for count report. So I've been assigned a count report Another that I folder used to here, go execute on my mobile device. And I can look for my count report. And I'm gonna do this count for count. Which is gonna be number 80 here. And now what's nice is that based on that route, and I can the warehouse, it's telling the user where to go. Which is gonna be where to go next. Yes, so we're not going from one corner to another. Based on that route through the warehouse, it's telling the user where to go. Where to go next. Yes, so. Not the original corner and wasted that time. At least going in further based on going that route through. Telling you, go to location PD right now. I've gone. Here's the part where you need to be counting. You don't see here, I've got the ability to. So for some reason, there's something there that you want to capture and then the camera. The system's gonna prevent that. Yes, sir.
Yes, then we have, definitive batch number for GMF only, and then having the serial number for each part, which is unique serial number for each part. So when the part in GMF, they will decide with special need batch number. And then when the part is maybe rotatable or repairable, there are unique serial number for the part that need to be displayed also in the dashboard.
So it ends up with two serial numbers essentially, is that,
Yes.
yeah, okay,
Yeah, two serial number. The first one is the base number,
okay,
the identification when the part arrived in GMF.
okay,
And then the second one is the serial number, which is applicable for the whole airline industries.
okay.
And both should be differentiated, but included in the slash base number.
Right,
And you make another maybe column or maybe special field for serial number?
might it represent a manufacturer's serial number or something?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that column is available and is stored separately as well, and it can be displayed on the screen.
And can you split the lot and batch number? With in GMF, our understanding regarding lot is the lot of manufacturing.
Yeah,
Manufacturing base. But batch number is GMF batch number. So to avoid confusion, can you split lot number into specific column, batch number into specific column, and serial number?
so that's this example right here for these battery packs. There's 4 of them, each has its own serial number, but they all belong to the same batch. So we can track one or the other or both, or none.
What about the lot number? Manufacturing lot number. Can we create manufacturing lot number?
Yes. You can also do the same with the supplier's lot number and serial number as well. So you could conceivably have 3, yours, the manufacturers, and the suppliers.
Yes, between one line.
Yep, yep.
Oh, yes. What about the, how much is the residence?
Sorry, we can't hear the question.
How about the integration of the hangar meters and of eventually regarding or remove the third party class A? Because if we saw from the inventory stock, we saw the component and then we want to know about the scenario or function about the problem in projects maintenance in hangar or the engine, but the solution is not from the component the problem and then we okay. And then how about the component regarding we first stuff and then the solution of the problem in the hangar of the component and then we forget. How about the component? Yes, regarding the base number, we reset the new base number or we can use the of the base number.
So were you in yesterday's sessions? So the short answer is, this is one system. These are not different modules that have to be integrated, they are inherently integrated. That part is that part. And whether you move it from the airline to commercial to defense through supply chain, send it to a vendor, and if you have access, and we have very, very granular controls over what each person or each role can see and what they can do, but there is no integration because it's one system. It is integrated because it's all one platform.
Yeah, I mean the information is in the past. It's the same after we remove and install.
Yes, exactly. So if the airline buys new aircraft and engineering on the airline side just enters the burner or serial number because they're going to track it. If you have access, you can see that even for the inventory. It's not in an inventory. You're aware that GMF as a whole owns that part number and serial number, and it is flying on an aircraft right now. And when that comes to line maintenance or anything serviceable, you already knew about that part number serial number. You're just saying now it's not on the aircraft. Engineering is going to document the removal. Supply chain is going to document moving it into inventory and serviceable. Go through whatever processes, but there's no integration that has to happen there because it's all one system, which I think is something really important to understand. I'm getting the feeling more and more that with the Swift solution, you really have pretty disconnected pieces that have to and don't always talk to one another, but this is absolutely one single solution. So the answer to your question is yes, but I do think it's important to understand that it's not an integration. It is really just, there aren't multiple database records. There's one record of that part, and whether you're in the airline or supply chain or the defense, the commercial MRO, it doesn't matter. It's one record of what is it doing as far as engineering records, if it's on a city link or a guerrilla aircraft. What is it doing for MRO as far as issuing it and putting on the third party aircraft, and any movement that it may have through your own shops, through the engine shop, out to repair center, et cetera. These aren't different records that all need to understand how to talk to one another. Is one record.
That the content of the part in the information regarding the part, we saw and we remove, and then the part still is serviceable. I think that information we want to know that the before going is the number or it is set software.
The current compliance status, so what is the total time of the component, what is the entire history, what's the last overhaul, were there false raised against, did it have an NDT, when did it last go to a shop, that live with their components. So as it moves around, whether it's on an aircraft, whether it's on the shelf, or whether it's sitting on an engine assembly, but that engine is not installed in an aircraft, it doesn't matter, that lives apart and it follows it from cradle to grave. So true cradle to grave traceability, and that lives with that part, right? We did dive into that yesterday with engineering a little bit with execution, but we brought up a part, to show that it's all there. Yeah, no, I know, much is more, because it would record it, if you want to see it, I'm telling you, but if you want to see it for yourself, you can go back and take a look at the recording, and you can see that is how we went. Did that answer your question though? Is that what you're asking about? Is that compliance information?
You can use that.
Is that whether the cell numbers will be the same or not? The removal or it's not?
Yeah, it's the same part. Absolutely.
Is it possible to change the serial number?
A serial number change? Yes. In fact, that's a common thing for us because if you buy a used aircraft, there are lots of serialized parts that you want to know it's there, but it's not necessarily like limited. There isn't always an overhaul. So when we, for example, on the engineering side, when they create a new aircraft, you'll actually have a lot of XXX serial numbers. And the system will actually force technician when they do buy the new aircraft, update that serial number. But it does not create a new copy. You're not going to have an XXX that's now orphaned. And this new serial number, the serial number is just an attribute of that part. Under the hood, there's a unique identifier, like in the database, there's a unique identifier for that part. The serial number is just an attribute of that. And so, yes, you can change the serial number, but you're not losing the history. You're not creating a duplicate record of that part or any of that. And so it's a value that you're changing. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood your actual question. If that's all you're asking, but I do think it's still important to understand, based on what I've heard, for the way your current system works, that our different, what we call modules are not different pieces that have to be integrated. It is one common core, and you can just turn on and to make other things work. I just want to check. Did that answer your question? Did I get the?
No, I'm on this one from this question regarding apparently with the same part number and the condition is still very simple.
Correct.
I want to know the base number of the version with the new base number, or still can we use the last base number, because
The batch
the
number.
condition is not only for the function mesh. Install and then we
Yeah.
with the serviceable system. Again, that the information the part number we can use it the repeat the number, or then we need automated direction.
So the installation from the technician view will have no impact on the batch number. The second piece, that's a question for you, Carter, so I think I understand the question better now. They have a part, they issue it out of inventory, technician takes it, goes, they install it for, let's say, troubleshooting. I put a new one on, now that it fixed the problem, so that wasn't the problem. So I'm gonna take it off serviceable and give it back to stores. Is the system going to generate a new batch number when I return it basically unused, or will it just keep the batch number that it had? So keep the batch number was the answer. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. Again, my apologies, that's sort of a long.
Sir.
That's, the actual installation
Never know.
piece does not impact the inventory piece. Okay, so the inventory transaction of issuing it out and then returning it unused will retain the same batch number. Thank you.
I'm glad that was the right answer. Okay, let's look at just a couple other parts here on this because it does bring up some important concepts to you. These fuel pumps here that I've highlighted, so each one is in a different location, that's okay. But you can also see I've got different records here. The blue indicates these are owned by customers. And then the next column is telling me who the owner is. So that's important because I don't want to be using a different customer's owned part on an order for somebody else, right? So we segregate who owns the inventory. So we have visibility of that inventory. We know exactly what's on hand that's owned by the customers, but it also doesn't have any impact on our financial books. And then I do have one at the bottom here that isn't highlighted. It's one of the fuel pumps, and it's simply owned by us. Company owned indicates we own it. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about, the very bottom here is the boxes. And the boxes are simply consigned goods. So the vendor has provided them to us. We can see in the next column, this is the vendor that owns those. And when we consume them or move them to somebody, then we have to pay for them. Okay.
How about the inventory has been moved from another project and then we also arrive regarding the OG can be from the program side can be checked with the ability the first in first out or from expired
Example.
yeah.
Sorry.
We have the project.
Just not saying the wrong thing.
We can't hear. Can't hear. Sorry, design.
We have separate projects in the hangar or the engine with the same part number,
Okay.
but for the stock because not
Okay.
how the system will be the is
So,
That part will automatically be reallocated to the higher priority, but based on some certain rules, like who owns the part, what is the location, et cetera, and you can turn that off for certain locations, certain parts, things like that. You're never gonna want auto reservation reallocate an engine assembly to another aircraft, something like that. That's always going to be a person. So beyond the piece of Karen's going to talk about as far as the ability, there is automations under that as well for the things where you have a preset list of rules you want followed. Why have a person have to look through a list and go, yes, of course I'm going to do that. We really want to try to automate as much of that common, simple transactions, and then leave the complex or high value decisions to a person to decide.
Excellent point.
Regarding the aturan Pak Agus, you explain this
I'm sorry?
aturan Pak Agus.
Okay.
You explain the internal scenario.
Alternate fire number?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The short version, because sorry to say, we covered all of this with engineering. There will be a bit of a difference on the independent MRO, so the third party side. But for Garuda and CityLink aircraft, all of the alternate or substitution rules, the allowable configurations defined by engineering. And as also the general rule, when you make a part demand, either for scheduled maintenance or for a non-routine fault that's raised by a technician, the technician usually does not ask for a part number. They're asking for a part group. They're basically saying, I need a part that can go in the pilot altimeter spot, that position on this exact tail number. And engineering has defined there are 5 different altimeter part numbers that could go on this aircraft type. Here are all the rules around them. For example, one-way or two-way substitutions. If I have a newer altimeter in place, I can never go back to an older one. Certain serial number aircraft can only have a newer, these 3 part number altimeters. Pre and post mod effectivity. If we carry out this modification, only these part numbers are effective. Part to part incompatibilities. If I have this co-pilot altimeter installed, I cannot use this old part number. All these rules engineering sets up. So what happens at the when a planner puts work together and the demands come out, or when a technician has to fall and says, I need a part, as a general rule, they just say, I need the part that can go there. Then the system evaluates all those rules. And they have those 5 2 that are actually allowed to go on that aircraft right this minute. And then that's also where our reservation is. It says, based on the rules, that works to be done here. First one there, or for something else inside of it. It then flows down into all so that's generally speaking how it works. There's always the option for users if they have the permissions to override that, although they can't override the allowable configuration. They can't force a part on there that engineering said cannot be there. But they can choose to reserve a different acceptable part. On the third party side, that's a bit different. We won't have all of the engineering rules. So supply chain will be able to see what are the possible interchangeable rules, but a person is going to have to validate, if we're changing again, just an altimeter on a defense aircraft, what parts are we allowed to have? Because your engineering department won't have already predefined on that. So probably you're having to look at that list of possible alternatives, pull up the IPC, look up the reference for that exact tail, et cetera, and then a human will have to make that decision. Does that answer your question? Okay. Again, kind of a long answer, but on the airline side, that process is highly automated, and from a compliance perspective, it ensures absolute 100% compliance, because the technician is not allowed to ask for a part that can't go on that aircraft in that position at this exact moment. Stores can't reserve one, they can't issue one, they can't purchase one, whenever other transactions are in there. And finally, even if the technician didn't ask for it and walked over to the parts room, picked up a part, walked out, installed it, when they go to document it and say, here's what I did, the system will not let them do that. So we try to stop that at the very beginning and make sure that you never get to that stage. And we enforce that at every step of the way for, again, diverted and sailing aircraft.
Okay, so just to finish up on this transaction, which of course is a very, contains a lot of information, not only that, but is whenever you select a record or two here, our buttons appear up at the top that let us do a lot. So we can distract us, we can. This, different ways, move parts. We can, backtrack. So. Do. At this point, finish warehouse and. And. Going on. Is we have. Services coming out, all day. Those examples, there's ways that demand is coming in. We have what we need, when we need, where we did, okay? So. Yes, sir.
In the version, sunset. So
You can do that one. You just go and ask. Okay. And join and individual releasing. On an asset.
set, we can stop at escalation. We did this.
Yes.
We- This is and people especially us. We have contract is it's only for Honda airline. Contract is only for city airline. And when the demand so speaking will be suggest you only can be
And we have to have parts supplied by only certain vendors for, based on who the customer is.
yes.
Okay. There we, I believe we're working on that, but in the meantime, it's, maybe. Okay,
Wait, one part number one contract, you can say, who can you pay from?
okay,
Or do you have to provide?
so from the MRO side, we've got.
And
Okay.
I demonstrated that yesterday, actually.
Okay.
So for your third party work, when you create commercial contracts, those part provision rules define on different either part grouping or individual part numbers, who provides that part and how, and it goes all through customer, be provided, but also into more details like that part is going to go to our own repair shop. That part is going to go to our external vendor. That part is going to go to the customer's external vendor. So that's all part of the contract mechanism that gets applied to each individual work package that you put together. And that drives that entire part of the provisioning process.
So this is it's already on the system. It's already.
Yeah, that's all capability that's there.
Quick question, how do you do your material demand planning right now? Do you have like, is it done by SAP automatically? When do you run it? How do you do your MRP right now?
Manual.
You're forecasting the material demands, yes, exactly. And that is for all your inventory, or do you run it separately? Do you have like specifically marked out for third party work, specifically for like, because we understood like, some of the inventory are specifically earmarked for Garuda and Civilian, some are earmarked for third party. Do you run MRP separately for either or? Really separate MRP for the defense?
For component, for the
Okay.
supply.
Okay.
We are doing agreement with vendor But this pooling agreement is only for supplying only specific customer. But some parts is part number is coincidence. Yeah, same part number, but from vendor A only can be supply for this customer, and vendor B can as a supply for customer.
Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, we just, yeah. So, good. Just one.
Ready to move forward with demand management and fulfillment or?
Sorry, maybe two another questions.
Okay.
Okay, the first one, what is your strategy for dangerous goods material?
Or, I'm sorry?
Dangerous goods material. For this, your part that's supplied with the the plastic, maybe like hypochloric acid or strong acid or maybe several greases or oils. We have the requirement that for specific part number can only be stored in specific area and must not be closely related to another.
I think we covered it right before you arrived.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You talk about it fast.
Okay,
Yes,
Yes.
all from IFS regarding the part that is cancelled for use. Maybe
substitutions.
no, cancelled for use.
Yeah.
So
Cancel.
let's say a mechanic request that part numbers and then maybe I'm not sure what is the equivalent transaction in IFS, but it is concerned to maybe whatever. And then the project finish and then they do the physical inventory. Oh, there are two type numbers that not used.
Yeah.
And the two part number will be returned to yeah. Yeah, in our terms, it of the RWS, return to warehouse. What is the policy of IFS regarding the part that is on some or transaction or installed, but actually it is not installed and returned back to the warehouse? Does it still maintain the same value or the value will be zero when the part returned to the warehouse?
So you used it in a job?
They issued 10 parts,
Yeah,
and when they were finished, they realized 2 didn't get used.
okay,
So
so
they wanted to
we're
back to
turning those in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The return, the part that will be returned, that returns to the warehouse, will they retain the original price?
Yes.
Or is it a zero because it is used in the transaction?
Right, okay, so you issued 10 and so those were out of inventory for some time and now you're turning 2 of them back in. They go,
Yes,
yeah, they go back in at their original value.
Or back to the original value?
Yeah,
Even though there are transactions that states that the fund already used.
correct. So you're going to issue it and then it's essentially going to be an unissued. And then it's restored back to inventory at that original value. So if it was issued out at 10, it goes back into inventory or like $100, it goes back into inventory at $100.
This is just an open discussion, so I would like your expertise regarding this video. The fund in our previous system, in our current system, when the fund is consigned, we call it consigned.
Okay,
So the fund is transferred to the production and the production usage, which is the transaction name consigned.
yep,
When the fund is consigned, it is not available again in the inventory system.
Correct.
So no one can see it.
correct,
And we assume that the part is actually used. It is
Correct.
actually, the transaction concern is synonym for use.
yes,
But somehow the part that was concerned actually is not concerned.
Yep.
Yeah, the part is not concerned. So, but the project already delivered and the cost already sent to the customer. So when the part returned to the warehouse, should it be zero because the cost already sent to the customer, or it still need to be returned to the original buyer?
but for an inventory valuation, it should go back into inventory at its original value.
Even though the part of the, even though the part.
Correct. For inventory valuation purposes, it should go back in the inventory at its original value because it still holds that value presumably, because you could use it somewhere else
Yes.
at that same value. Yeah, so from an inventory valuation perspective, I think it should go back into inventory at its value. Now, what happened with customer, that's another concern.
Just a question, maybe this is better in the finance piece. You debited the appropriate GL account, added
Correct.
value,
Correct.
and you ended up transferring that to basically an accounts receivable value that was
Correct.
invoiced to the customer.
Right.
So you've reduced your stock holding value.
It's really two topics.
And the question is.
One more conversation is exactly right. Normally what's happening is you deal with the customer floor, so you pay them money. But when they transfer back in the inventory,
Yeah.
they still go back and look value, but the job basically gets profitable.
Yeah.
Because you remove the cost of it. Back, they got back dollars down in the money, but the inventory still has value.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, two topics.
Good. But we're gonna try to finish up the man finding before we move on to this. Sorry. Let me pass it back. Okay, actually, okay, and then.
Yeah, recommend.
Shop or help. It's all on stuff. I got it.
Right.
Who's doing this the best I can?
And I think that's the next. Yes. Just so.
Okay,
Yeah, polished it.
sources of demand. If anybody's having to do any kind of material planning processes, you're gonna recognize that demand is coming in from everywhere. You've got your work tasks that are being executed on aircraft. You've got movement of materials between locations. You need to maintain certain stock levels of certain parts and they need to be replenished periodically. You've got your MRO shop orders that are going on that are consuming parts. You're selling things, so that's a source of demand. You could be loaning something out to a customer or to another party. That's a source of demand. And then you're probably gonna have people writing, say, requisitions for materials, or perhaps there's employee self-service. All of these different demands are coming in for parts, and we have to fulfill those somehow. That's what our next task is here. So we have a list of the materials and parts that are needed for aircraft maintenance activity. And on the left-hand side, you can see I've highlighted some cells in red there. Those are my AOG demands. So those are going to take priority, of course. But our issue is towards the right-hand side there, the zeros that are highlighted in red, I don't have any stock available. So I've got to take care of those situations. So this is one source of demand. Another source of demand is going to perhaps a transfer to another location where some kind of paperwork or shipping is involved. If it's got that's going to be and we fulfill that one or the other. Work in this case, that's what I wanted to do. And I am going to need a tool that I don't use very often, but I rent it from somebody. It's not how I get this to fulfill my demand. We can support that. And of course, there's an example here where we have a lot of parts that a list of parts. These, but we don't right now. So our planning processes are going to help us out to fulfill these demands. Any of these demands can be handled by a planning process as needed, but oftentimes perhaps there's some expediting activities, especially in the case of an AOG. So we want to be able to handle all of these various ways. And then lastly, we've got that customer order. So we've said that we are selling some parts, This is another source of demand. Where we have decided to sell things to our customers. If we have them on hand, that's great. If we don't, we need to get them. So just to show you how you can be bombarded, if you will, by all these different demands that want to have some kind of fulfillment. I was going to show the customer portal. So, let's see, we're gonna, now, our potential then sources of supply. So we've seen all of our demands here. These could come from stock. We could be writing some purchase requisitions or purchase orders. We can have the shipment orders that are gonna transfer goods, repair orders, exchanges, borrows, rentals, manufacturing. We could be making, say, the PMA parts that are going to be usable. We could be reallocating from one project to another project or to an AOD demand. Your source of demands can also include, or source of supply can also include those ship or shelf, anything that's in receiving discrepancy right now, because we might be able to resolve that, anything that's in quarantine. So now we're going to be trying to balance all these demands with all these potential sources of supply. Okay. Get me back into the meeting. Hey, well, folks online probably aren't going to see this for time being.
Okay.
We will be in with us.
Terus koneksinya sih.
Should be coming back.
Okay.
Good day, right now. Incoming letters. Then we have from 11 down.
There's a connectivity problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can show PowerPoints, but that's it.
Okay.
Thinks it's on, but.
Oh, yeah. Try it again.
Not connected to the internet.
Oh, I gotta get back on the Jeremy's phone.
Which Wi-Fi are you actually using?
Jeremy's phone.
This should be coming back.
So maybe I'm going to cover the procurement first.
That's what we did.
Mm,
Now
I think they're for the first half.
If we want. Planning, we can share.
Mm, I'm not sure about that one, but oh yeah. Apa?
Yeah, what we're doing here.
Yang procurement sendiri. Oh yeah. Demand planning. I see.
Really into this, that doesn't go forecast.
For planning.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Continue, please.
Okay.
So just to show you here, this is another lobby that we built having to do with park demand. So it's got a counter that need to be expedited and so forth. So this is just another central place. So this is what the lobbies that handle these demands. Also in the upper right hand corner, a lot of times what people, and I especially like to do, is if there's transactions I'm going to go to frequently, I make a list of them in part of my lobby. So that enables me to go quickly out to a transaction that I might want to take a look at. So let's, for instance, look at our open material rec lines. This is that same transaction that we saw a little bit ago where I've got these AOG situations and my, the red columns to the right are where I don't have any stock right now.
Sorry, can you join the Teams?
Join it again.
Yeah, because you are disconnected. Dan bisa juga yang orbit itu. Not sure, katanya suka up and down sih. Kalau saya sih oke, ya masih bisa. Eh,
So my maintenance material rec lines here, just to show you a couple different ways that we can handle some of these. For instance, in this first line, I have a quantity required of 1. I've got 18 available right now and a quantity on hand of 54. This is an important distinction. So I have 54 of them on hand, but only 18 are available, which means that that difference is somehow allocated to other things. And I could go out and see what those allocations were if I wanted to, but since I only need 1, I've got 18 available. This one would be very easy to take care of. We can simply reserve those. And then using that reservation logic that you can configure these for you. And now we have a green highlight on this. The quantity reserved is now 1. So I'm good with that. And normally on a transaction like this, I really only want to see the records I need to be concerned about. So if I were working this list, that would fall off my list right away. I don't anymore. So just a function of how the screens would behave. I keep it up here just to show the fact that I did take care of this one. But if I wanted to, I simply this would take that one off my list. So that would be, say, a normal in-stock reservation. Another possibility could be that I could, right from here, write a new purchase requisition. Now, my planning processes can also take care of this for me. But what would be nice about this one is that if I create this new purchase requisition, what we're going to see here is that my requisitioner will be WO for work order, because it's coming from a maintenance or work task, if you will. And what will then happen is that when those parts are received through purchasing, they're automatically allocated to that demand. So this will be reserved already to that work task where we needed those materials. Whereas MRP works a little differently. MRP says, give me all of your demands and I'll create everything, but nothing's allocated until you do that allocation step. This has made a pegged reservation to that purchase requisition. When those things arrive, they're automatically allocated. They're automatically reserved to that demand that originated this. That makes And then I also mentioned that, say, there could be another case on hand. I have 12, or maybe in this case I have 10 on hand, but I need 12. So I can see that there's 10 available, but 50 on hand. I could go see where those other 40 are allocated. And then if necessary, then manually or automatically re-reserve some of those to fulfill that demand. So those are just options that you have for fulfilling the demand here. talk about some of the planning mechanisms that are available. Oh, it froze. I'll get back to where we were. There we go. Okay. Hey, made it.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, the technical. Yeah. I'm sharing and connecting to the HDMI. Let's try this. Here we go. Yeah. Doing X video.
I was doing that the other day in the car, and it's because the cable was, you had to fidget and the cable would work.
Yeah.
Turn that off, turn it back on again. The projector. I know almost fails. Turn it back on.
Yeah, not doing that. It's a lot.
Stop sharing.
No, like that's fish from your side. That's what I had to do. No, usually I would do that. Feels like that.
Yeah.
I think we finally settled the issues in high kid. Problem. And
Itu nggak kedetek lagi tadi.
oh, you know how normally it links to the.
Yeah, it's not even that.
Biasanya kan
It's
ada
like this, like, thing you're doing.
Yeah, it's
All this.
In your laptop needs to rest. Okay.
So your computer actually knows it's plugged in. Sure. I think you were doing the beginning, right?
Oh, to broken or what do you think? I mean, realistically, I don't think for what the money is.
Yep.
back.
Okay. Back.
Okay. So now we're gonna get planning tools here so that we can handle those fulfillments. So I want to start with the idea of able to do forecasting ahead of during our planning activities. So the flow then from forecasting to planning to supply is what we're looking at, right? So in our first column here, the forecast for parts, we have a tool, IFS demand planning, that we're going to go take a look at. That it's a statistical forecasting tool, and it's going to create predictions about what the system thinks you're going to need going forward based on your historical use. And that can feed into some of our planning processes. Now, along the way, another extension of this process is what we call inventory planning and replenishment. And this is a tool to help you set safety stock levels, reorder point quantities, and lot sizes or quantities that you're going to reorder. So that's always going to be a balancing act because we can't carry unlimited amounts of inventory. It costs money to do that. We want it, but we do want to have some level when we need to reorder these things and so forth. So the inventory planning and replenishment tool is going to help us do that. And it can set our safety stocks, reorder points, and lot sizes. These go into our planning processes. The planning processes there in column 3 are going to take sources of demand that we saw, plus the will then use an a reorder point or min-max process to create the supply records that you need to either move parts between locations or to perhaps write some purchase requisitions, for instance. And that's where we're going to head next, is through into the purchasing area as well. So we're going to start with the forecasting, because this can be used to help with any kind of demand that you're having. It's going to help us to maintain those appropriate inventory levels. So demand planning, it's a statistical forecasting tool. It's going to use historical data and mathematical models to make predictions about the future demand for something. It has a variety of those mathematical models, and with it, it also supports seasonality. So nature, you're going to want to handle the supply of those differently. When you're doing forecasting, you always want to be able to see how well we're forecasting. So if I forecast 250 for some period in time and the actual demand ended up being 300, there's an error. If the actual demand ended up being 190, also an error. We want to know how accurate our forecasts are. And it's always going to be a combination of those mathematical models, the statistical methods, and your best judgment. So you always have the final say on what that forecast is going to look like. And input to several. So let's go take a look at what planning looks like. Now we'll see how to log in. Username and password. And down the left-hand side here, we have our various parts that we're going to be forecasting. So I'm going to go look at one of them to show you, get you an introduction to the display, what it's doing here. But you can see that we have a graphical view of history and the location here where the line is connected. Everything to the left is going to be historical information, and there's right inside that shows us which line we have turned on. Here's our historical forecast, that dark green line. And then the blue line represents what was our actual demand in each of those periods. So you can see that in periods, we did an okay job of forecasting, but in other periods, we were way off. But that's because we don't have a lot of history. So this one will have some additional hand holding or care and feeding until we end up with some more data. So based on the mathematical model, and this is what this forecast. So things we're going to need based on this information. Now, I mentioned that we always have that final say in what's going to be the forecast going forward. So based on my permissions, I have the ability to make changes to this forecast. We can also see here for any of our statistical forecasting junkies in the room, that confidence intervals around this data. So you can see that these are plus and minus 1 and 2 sigma. This is we always have in hurricanes. So they're trying to predict where the hurricane's going to go. And they have this cone of uncertainty because they don't know on Thursday where it's really going to end up. So we know where it is today, but we don't know to be in the future. So that's what these confidence intervals are doing. Is this has got a wide cone of uncertainty here. So I'll show you an example here of one.
The background, the blue background is basically the trajectory.
It's like a trajectory, but it's like uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Yeah. And it's represented by plus and minus 1 and 2 sigma around the data. So I'll show you another. Again, this one doesn't have a lot of history to work with. However, we have another part in here where this one right here happens to have a lot of history to it. It's got a very stable trend to it. We've done a good job of forecasting it in the future. So it's we're going to see that one much more narrow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have to intervene on this one. We'll be able to just the system take care of it. I'm just worried about the ones where I have a much larger forecasting error. And then you show one more here of a part that we would be dealing with or would have some downstream impacts here is this one, this personality to it. Yeah. So we can see that it's got an upward trend to it, but it does seasonality. I want a different stocking strategy for this one because I don't want to be carrying enough safety stock to handle these points. And in reality, I've got a lot of periods where I'm not expected to have a and likewise, if I'm carrying safety stock based on this pattern here, out of stock probably frequently on those high demand areas. This is what some of those tools are going to be able to help us with, and that's what I want to talk about next. So this data from the statistical forecasting tool has several outlets, places where it can be used. So you can do what if scenario planning as well. So if we expect to be inducting some new aircraft here, what would happen to the demand for those parts? I can do a what if scenario for that. If I perhaps have a higher failure rate, maybe I want to do a scenario for that, what that impact that would have, say, on our stocking levels. But what we're going to talk inventory planning and replenishment. And this is a very sophisticated tool to help us set what should safety stock be, especially for that seasonal part. How many should we keep at a point in time? When should I? So as I deplete my stock, how low does it get before I reorder more? And when I order more, how much should I reorder? So there's a lot of into this, and this is what we're going to start talking about here. Okay, so we're going to define and we've got 3 values here. We don't have a lot of history to work with yet, but perhaps something that is declining. It's not going to be used in the future. So our sweet spot, if you will, this tool is in the upper right-hand corner. So the green, the bright green for sure, maybe some bees, maybe a little bit of the yellows might be good for this tool, but let's see what it's going to do for us here. So, mentioned that we have that, our park data is going to be set up here, and we are going to look at that forecast information as what we think we're going to need in the future. So let's look at this part. Now, what I've said here is that highlighted box there, service rate of 90%. What that's saying is that if I have a demand for something, there's a 10% chance I won't have it. Okay? Can you live with that? Maybe for some parts you can, other parts you can't. When my service rate is 90%, it's saying to change that service. As I expect, what that's going to do is recalculate the safety stock value. So if I want to hit 95%, I only will be able to stock out 5% of the time. Then I'm going to have to carry more safety stock. Of course, that comes with impacts as well, because it costs money to carry inventory, and it takes up space and so forth. So it becomes very much a balancing act here. So that's one scenario that you could think of using this tool for. And then in the other one, so this is our seasonal part, remember? Where we want to make sure we have the safety stock to cover these situations. So what we can do, and again, this is using that very same tool, we have the concept of time-phased safety stock. So it will give you then period by period what your safety stock level should be, so that we make sure that when we have that low demand, we're not carrying gobs and gobs of inventory that we don't really need. But when that starts ramping up and we have that peak, if you will, we will have enough safety stock. You see how this could be a really powerful tool to help determine what your stocking strategy should be for any part. And then what will happen next is that when we reach these reorder points, the system will create the supply orders that you need to take care of that resupply and make sure that you have enough safety stock and you have enough to cover your future demands going forward.
Is it automatic? Automatically. And also based on the lead time.
Correct. So there's actually your service level is one percent. The other thing that comes into play here is the ordering costs. So, 1,000 to place an order versus 10,000. Less frequently that 10,000 order than the 1,000, which I can do that more frequently. So it'll do all of that balancing act to determine what those appropriate values should be. And what's also powerful, again, is looking into, you can look at strictly historical data and just base it on that, but having that future demand where you can pick up those increasing trends, the seasonality, or perhaps it's a downward trend, and you can react, the system will react appropriately for that.
Update from the exit, something.
Yes,
Automatic.
automatic. It's magic. It looks like magic, doesn't it? Yeah, it's actually using this data.
This data per part number.
Yeah.
All part family is the. Depends on the configuration, part or part family.
We from the department always talk about the opportunity and what is optimizing inventory as well. The solution is really helpful for us. Can you tell us the success story about which MRO are aligned using this solution and what we call it, whether interest at this level or the interest of inventory optimization using these tools. Then you will know them.
Yeah, that's situation. Absolutely.
They will get validation.
So I think one of the customers straightforward, myself and Matt are board, airline, China Airlines. Straightforward, after they started doing our demand planning, they saved $600,000. It was not stated to us, it was given to an IBC report, it's published, that is there. Then there were some stats which, I think, just give me a second, I was just highlighting this to others as well. We had the same customer, have an 8% reduction in gross stock value. 8%. So meaning that much of inventory hold. Tools like this. So there are many more. I think I can cover it to my colleague Matt. I think we're happy to share all the info. We definitely have different value stories that we can share.
Because at the end, we have to ensure our public minimum. Using these tools, we can saving up to 8% in value. Increase our service like as well, one kind of thing.
I mean, see, straightforward, if I have to give you one stat, right, I think this was what was most interesting. Like, because it's a continuous process, it's not on day one, right? When we evaluated a customer after 3 to 5 years, we saw there was a 15 to 20% improvement based on where the system was before the system, after the system, and the impact of 4 to 5 years of using the system, right? This is just in the inventory space. There's many more other actions that it supports as well. You're able to do more maintenance activities. You're able to push out your maintenance activities faster because you're not waiting on parts. Because it's part is coming to you on time, right? So a lot of things are there. I just wanted to make sure that it is all articulated together rather than me just throwing some numbers to you. So happy to support. Yeah, just ask us. We have to give you.
And we can take the break for lunch. Yeah, here in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Should we take a break and come back?
For
Demand.
the planning and fulfillment topic, yeah, yeah, that's basically what we end up coming back here, what we were looking at there with the graphs is the demand planning line. How it moves into inventory planning and replenishment to help calculate the safety stock, reorder point, and lot size values. Those go into our planning processes like MRP, like reorder point or min-max planning. And then it's going to generate, what we're going to see next in the procurement section is how it generates the purchase requisitions for us. So we'll move into execution in the next section.
What about the component planning?
Okay.
Existing this tool of, how about the sampling scenario, let's say for the component, not always purchase.
Right. Yeah.
How to determine this demand is for inspect, we call it for inspect. How to calculate the inspect of the component.
How to calculate the weight.
Like maybe for the expandable part, like
Okay.
the other point
Uh-huh.
for the component, because for the component, the supply scenario, not always purchase, right? Sometimes we just repair
Okay.
or internal repair. How to meet the requirement with the something.
So what's going to happen in the planning process is it's going to look at what your default method is. And it's going to tell you, it's going to give you a message that you need something. And then from the message should exist or the system can create, let's say the default is to purchase it. The system can create that purchase. You've also, it's happened in two things. It's a message you need more. And it's you supply for it. Based on the fact that I need more, I could make a different decision. I may say, no, instead I'm going to repair these. You've got a bunch on hand that could be repaired because it doesn't really know. Right? It, at the end of the day, it's a big calculator. But you can then say override that default decision. And maybe if I needed 20 and I'm going to buy 15, but I'm going to repair 5. Or I'm going to borrow 5, or I'm going to, whatever that fulfillment on.
So the fulfillment strategy is basically going back to the plan
Yeah,
on how to fulfill, right?
correct.
Oh, mau break dulu.
We'll move forward to procurement.
Mau, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's like 20 minutes, right? 15 to 20 minutes. Ya, oke, ya. Ya. Teman-teman kita lanjut aja dulu ke procurement sebentar ya. Habis itu kita break. Oke, apa ya, Pak? Bisa di press sih.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if there's stuff that I start talking about is important by all means.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, now we are in the order management section. And here, I'm focusing more on purchasing at this point, as opposed to manufacturing, as opposed to transferring goods around. For procurement, what we're gonna look at is how did those supply recommendations, get generated? What do they look like? They're gonna be in the form of requisitions. They will also potentially become orders. We have the ability to do requests for quotations. There could be authorizations required when we're purchasing things. There's also a supplier or vendor portal available. So I wanted to show you that if that is of interest as well. So we're going to start off with these origins of requisitions and orders, and we've talked about a lot of these already. The planning processes are any of our replenishment processes can generate purchase requisitions, purchase orders, work packages, any of our MRO activities. There's an employee self-service portal. Somebody can go in and say, I'd like to have a new laptop. They can be manually generated as well. And then, so the types of supply orders that we can generate are going to be, say, for parts that could be stock and used in our activities. We could also be purchasing that's a particular or associated with it. We could be doing exchanges. We could do extra. Okay. We could also be doing more. We can also be doing loans from our vendors. So those are we move just they all are the same place. They all end up in the same kind of work. So you end up with just a couple maps to work with. You don't have to think about, oh, is this an exchange? Therefore, I have to use this. No, this is the purchase, so I have to use that. You don't have to do it. It all ends up in one place. So the overall, the aspect of purchasing, we've got our orders at the center of it, if you will. Upstream from we're going to see some requisitions that have been generated. A requisition can become a request for quotation. Those can also stand alone if you want them to. Requisitions and orders can go through some authorization processes. I can talk about that as well. They are supported by supplier agreements, which are agreements for pricing terms and so forth. There is the ability to do electronic exchange of orders, order changes. It also goes into ASNs and invoicing that can also be done electronically. So we'll have our receiving process, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about later. And then there's also change management associated with the purchase orders. If we do some inspection and we decide we need to return parts to vendors, we can do that. All of that then feeds our financial system for accounts payable purposes. Okay, so advanced shipping notice. Yeah, and what it is an advanced shipping notice could be a notice from our supplier. We have yes. But see this one. Yeah. Fire will send ASN to you. It will-
Because only stated to chasing to pick up.
Yeah, it'll mean that this is, yeah, it'll have been this is the time that submit an ASN. And we can feed it into, so. And the supplier is going to. These are on their way to you.
From ASN portal or can be.
It's a matter of their capability to transmit an ASN. Not everybody can do it. Some suppliers probably won't be able to, but it makes their life easier too, if they can just transmit the ASN. On the flip side, if you're sending things out to customers, for instance, you would be the one sending the ASN to your customer to say, these are on their way to you. And then they could receive it through the ASN as well.
Let's park ASN as a follow-up topic, because it doesn't sound like it's utilized today. So then we'll need to determine if it's something that you want to utilize or not. I think we do that outside of the session.
It's part of receiving any kind of substation if they're receiving them.
Okay, or maybe we'll come back to it. Portal parking is a.
I don't know when the teacher.
Yeah.
It's exciting stuff.
Good.
Yes, any complicated shipment process in our side.
Right.
Orders, so if ISN tool for.
Yeah, I hear that it could be a potential opportunity, so we don't want to pursue it.
Yeah,
further.
definitely
Yeah.
simplifies the receiving process. Okay, so if
Can we frame the ASN ourselves? I mean, if the vendor cannot complete it ourselves, can we get it ourselves?
you can, you can manually create an ASN if you want to. I would question the value of doing that. Because you'd be going in and say manually putting in records that are already there that you could simply receive against anyhow. Now, I will add one more thing to that, because maybe we don't get to receiving today. But if the vendor can send a PDF of a delivery note, we can now read that. It's even a little more than, we used to be OCR, well, now it's AI, because it can be smarter than just simply OCR was in the past. But that's another way to bring that data in, is by simply reading the PDF. Okay, so here I have a lobby that I made in this case because I wanted certain things on my lobby. But you can see that I've got some counters and some performance metrics, just other interesting ways to look at the data. But in my procurement links up at the top, I've got my requisition lines that I need to process. So that's what we're going to open up here. And you can think of this as a buyer's workbench. So it just depends on the query. I've asked for a bunch of orders going out, say a month, or a bunch of requisitions. These are all requisitions that need to be processed. Okay, they're intended to be purchases of some kind. But they all land here no matter where they originated. We'll see some examples of that. But each one will have, here's the parts that we're going to be purchasing here, the quantities. Now you can see here, there's authorizations required on some of these blue badges here indicate I can't finish processing this until the authorization's complete. Now my requisitioner column, that's important because this tells me where it came from. So at the very top, I used a Kanban transaction and it created a purchase requisition for me. I've written one manually here. You can see Karin is on there. Then the next two are work order generated. I mentioned earlier that we said on the one line, create a purchase requisition. That's that right there. So that when that's received, it goes automatically to that work order. I also have my min-max process, or my rear point process. And then I have some more manual ones, but the point here being that no matter where it came from in the system, it all lands here. And then I've also got an exchange order down here. And then for those work order ones, I could see exactly what work order it's for. Now, the next two columns are important. So wanted receipt date is when I want to have these ready to use in my facility. There's lead time involved. Transportation lead time, perhaps inspection lead time. Maybe the supplier has a lead time you have to take into account. So the next column becomes my latest order date. That means I need to place the order by this date if I want to expect to get those here in time and ready to use in time. So that's why I like to look at this transaction as my workbench. This column is sorted where this is the priority of my activities based on those dates. And then my status here is just simply a status of the requisition line itself. Now, a lot of times I'll know who the supplier is going to be, sometimes I won't. But from here, I'll be able to take some actions. If I select one of these, I could convert it to a request for quotation from here. If I need to go out for quotes on this, maybe I don't know who the vendor's going to be. And I can also do a conversion to an order. So we are going to select, we'll just select the first two lines here. And we're going to say requisition to order. The system will look to see if we have any orders out there we could just add it to. And it tells me no purchase orders exist. So I'm going to have to create a new one. That's fine. And it's going to process a little bit here. And then it's going to say that we have purchase orders that have been created. And it's going to ask me if I want to go take a look at that purchase order. So it says, do you want to view the created purchase order? Yes, please. So I now have a new purchase order in the system, and this is an example of a different kind of form. We've been looking at a lot of lists of things. This is one particular purchase order in this case. So it's going to have some header information and order ID associated with it, along with our supplier. And then it's going to keep track in the order amounts box of the value of that in our currency and perhaps in the vendor's currency, if those happen to be different. And then on our lines tab here, we have, this is what it is that we were purchasing. It goes and retrieves the pricing for us. So it knows, yes, question.
How does this fly it?
I'm sorry?
How does this fly?
How did it choose the supplier? Good question. So when you're setting up your parts, you have the option of saying that we have these suppliers that are available. If you have multiple suppliers, you can designate one as a primary. And so when the system generates you, it's going to use the primary supplier. Or if you want to divide up the business, let's say we have 3 suppliers and we say 40% goes here, 3%, 30%. It'll do then 3 purchase orders for us. So otherwise, if you haven't designated a primary supplier, that field will be empty. And so we won't know. And at that point, you can either designate who you want to use, or perhaps it's appropriate to go to a request for quotation and get some pricing from multiple suppliers. Does that answer? No. Okay. So on our lines, we're going to see when we start looking at some of the other orders, we'll get some additional information here. But it also went and retrieved pricing for us. So there are pricing tables behind the scenes where it can decide, in this case, that each of these 10 is worth, we have to pay 25 for each of the 10. So now, once this purchase order is ready, what we're gonna also see throughout the product is that things have statuses on them. And in this case, this is in a planned status right now. Planned status means I can do whatever I want with it. It's not ready yet to be sent off to the supplier. So as soon as it is ready, we advance the status then to released. And I lose.
Yeah.
I lost my
Connection.
my connectivity again.
Should be coming back in a second.
Yeah, it's okay.
So once it is set to a release status, then a few things become available. We can start receiving things because we've notified the supplier. We can send it to the supplier via email or EDI or Spec 2000, XML. We could record the supplier's confirmation. So they may come back and say, yep, we're good, or they may, my